All right. Well, it's so nice to see so many friends here, by the way. I recognize a lot of names, and I'm so happy that all of you have joined us. This is a great forum to be able to talk about our chosen profession and art form. So without further ado, let's introduce Jon Joffin, ASC, also BSc, cinematographer based out of Vancouver,
Actually,
but
actually, not BSc, just ASC.
just ASC?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, which is good enough. I mean,
Oh, yes. Those are the three letters you really want.
yeah,
ASC. Sorry, John. I didn't
yeah,
mean to add another title onto the back of
that's
you.
okay.
He is Canadian, though. He is Canadian. It's really true. And he's joining us today to talk about Fort Salem, it's actually called Motherland Fort Salem. There's, I think, a piece of the trailer or something's playing in the background behind John right now. Let's talk about your show, John. First, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and how you came up in the industry, please?
Well, I was born in South Africa. I moved to Canada, where I live. That's my home. I live in Vancouver. I've been always been into photography. It was something that my father taught me how to work in a dark room. So I had a love of photography from very early on. And it basically, I mean, the short version is it progressed into cinematography, and it's definitely what I wanted to do. I didn't know that, but I ended up learning that that was my career path. And I went to film school and I shot a lot of short films. I shot as many things as I could. Got out of film school and still kept shooting small things, but wanted to learn more. So I became a camera assistant, and I was a camera assistant for many years, which is a great job to have because it gets you right in the thick of the action. You're close to the DP. You can hear the director and the DP talking, and it's, you know, you can really observe the lighting. So that's the path I took. I operated for a little while and started shooting second units. Had a very big break on X-Files back in the day. Started shooting X-Files second unit.
Was
And
that with John Bartley?
That was with John Bartley. When John Bartley started, that was it was a groundbreaking show. I remember going out to work on that show for the first time. I went out as an operator, and I looked through the lens, and it was so dark. And I said to John, "I'm like, John, you need more light." And he laughed. He thought it was really funny, but it was a real it was a real turning point for TV because it was very bold. I mean, the whole idea was the less you saw, the more scary it was, and that it was very bold, and it also used a lot of the wide lenses up close in the face. And yeah, so that's how I got going, and I've got to shoot with some great people. I see Mikhail Solomon's name up there. I'm very lucky to meet him, and I shot quite a few projects with him. Learned a lot from him. You learn from all the people you work with. Everyone brings something different, and yeah, it's still a learning process. Every day I'm learning more things, and yeah, I just love it. I love making shots. I love telling the story, and I love setting a mood. That's my thing. And right now, being at home, stuck in quarantine, I'm jonesing a little bit to be on a film set. So I find myself shooting my kid, and I'm looking for excuses to get my camera out and shoot things. And as I was saying earlier, I shot some stuff last night, and I thought it was pretty good. And then I put it into Resolve, and I took a look at it, and it was all LED lights, and it's all flickering. So I spent the morning looking for a plugging to get rid of the flicker. So every day is a learning experience, even at home right now. So that's where I'm at. That's what's going on with me.
Cool, great. Let's get people into talking about the show itself. So this
Yeah.
show, Motherland Fort Salem, it's set in an alternative universe where witches from Salem were real, and basically to not get persecuted by the government, they set up a deal to actually be a part of the government, be an army for the government to use. And then, of course, there's a bad guy version of this group of witches, which is people that have the powers but don't want to be in the army.
Or
Type of
are
thing
they
called
bad? Or
or
are they
are they
bad?
bad? That's right. They're portrayed as bad, but
Yeah.
are they bad? They're the spree. And then, of
Yeah.
course, there's these group of witches. And then we're following the story of three of these young women that join, when called for: Abigail, Tally, and Rael. And this is kind of like what the story centers around. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that people can see some visuals of what we're talking about in case they haven't seen the show. So this is the three main characters, and of course, there's an interesting cast of characters, of course, mostly female-led characters, main characters that are part of the story. But the three main characters are right here, and portrayed here in front of the flag. But let's jump to Jon's work. So Jon's work on the show, you shot the pilot episode, the first episode.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what I did was I didn't want to pull images from everything to be a spoiler. So I pulled stuff from the first episode. And right away, we can see Jon's signature mark, backlit stuff, soft skin tones, and an overall softness to just about everything. Is this a look that you developed for the show, or is this something that's a part of you? How did this come about?
Well, to start off with the show, it's not an abracadabra magic kind of show. It's all very organic magic, and so we wanted things to be very, very natural, and we wanted the magic to feel real. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't doing lighting that didn't make sense. We wanted to use real sources. We wanted to just feel very, very real. So for me, I love soft light. I love working with soft light, not flat soft light, but shaped flat soft light. And it was just a natural progression to do the natural kind of lighting. So that is where it is. The images are on my screen. They're washing out my face, and they look a bit washed out compared to how they actually look. So I encourage people to take a look at the trailer and to watch the show.
And then in terms of creating the look with the directors and the producers of the show,
Yes.
Did they approach you for this project, or were you given a chance to pitch? How did the process work?
Definitely, it's always a pitch. It's nothing really ever seems to be handed to you. Yeah, I read the script. I loved the script. I thought it was very clever. It was full of a lot of twists. Epic. There's epic things that happen because these witches control the magic that they do is controlled with song. So there's nothing very witchy or abracadabra about it. It's all very organic. They use the song to control weather, and there's one shot you can see below, the one that's highlighted, and Rael's out in the field and she's watching someone train to control the weather, and she's smashing buildings with the power of the weather. So it was just an epic story, a lot of very ambitious, but at the same time it was an emotional, intimate kind of story between characters. It's a love story. So it just had so many layers, and it was something that I really wanted to do. So I had worked with the director before, with Stephen Adelson. We did a show called Beyond last year, and we spent time talking about what the look should be, how it should be sort of a magical realism. They wanted it to look real, but not boring. They wanted a rich, cinematic, epic kind of feel, and that's what we were going after. It's hard to tell what kind of time period we're in. That's what they wanted. They didn't want to be a specific time period, so there is somewhat of an antique vintage kind of look to it as well. In terms of lensing and getting the look, I had shot with the Supreme Primes. I shot a little demo movie with you guys before the lenses had been released, and I had fallen in love with the lenses. I love how clean they are, yet at the same time gentle and very, very smooth is the best way I can describe it. I've used Master Primes for quite a long time, but these lenses they just hit the right spot for me. And I tend to, especially on this project, I tend to shoot very wide open. And I find that at 1.4, those lenses, that's the sweet spot for me of those lenses. They look just absolutely superb. Shooting the large format, getting that background blur, it was all about making it feel very painterly, and at the same time directing the viewer's eyes to the characters and where we wanted to tell the story. So there's the ZEISS, the clip I shot for you guys called Passing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and then what was the about the pairing of the camera lens that that you really liked? Was it the coverage? Because it is a larger sensor with the
Yeah,
full frame
yeah,
size, and you did shoot 6K on the show and on this project. So, can you tell
yeah.
us a little bit
And
about that?
well, it's this whole idea of richness and it being cinematic on the television frame. And with the framing, we actually ended up framing 2.1, and we're the first show that Freeform allowed to do that. And uh, they just have scope to them. They just feel very, I mean, I think with digital cameras, I don't know if everyone approaches it the same way, but I have quite a film background. I've shot a lot of film, a lot of 35 millimeter film, and I'm sort of always chasing that kind of organic feeling. And I felt like those lenses, even though they're clean, they just have it's hard to put into words, but it's a smoothness, it's a richness, and they really appeal to me. I like I like anamorphic lenses and I like distortion, but for this project, it just felt like these were the right lenses. This is the feel we were after. I mean, the director talked and showrunner talked about wanting it to be very classic and very elegant, and it just seemed the right fit. And it was early on. It was right when the lenses were being released, and I remember you and Keslo working together to get us an early set. And on the pilot, we used one set. And by the time we got to the series, we were working with two sets, which was great. And we didn't use zooms at all. That's shot entirely on primes. We wanted to really pick our shots. The other thing we were very fortunate to have was the 135 mil lens, which had not been released yet, which is my absolute favorite of the line. You have one back there.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and
The
I think
135 with
yeah,
the 114 front. Yeah, there you go.
beautiful lens, and it's more like 100 mil spherical actually, more so than a 135. And we found we used it a lot when we were doing two camera setups for the one camera to reach in. But my absolute favorite thing to do with it is to shoot wider shots and back off and get that really beautiful blurry background on a wide shot. And there's and the lenses are so nice too. I mean, I use diffusion. I shoot with classic softs, but I find they just have such a nice tone and gentleness to them. In the times when we have filter kicks and we've got to remove the filter, they work just beautifully on their own. So couldn't be happier with those lenses. Oh,
Wonderful.
and another
And you
thing
use
is
radiance lenses
we
too, right?
did. Yes, I was going to get to that. And really like those. And we used them on our last two episodes, Radiance. The one thing that I found pretty amazing about them was you get these gorgeous layered kind of flares, but if you don't want the flares, it's very easy to flag them off, and they're pretty much exactly the same image quality as the regular Supreme Primes. But yeah, really enjoyed those lenses.
Great. Yeah, and that was used on the last two episodes of the series, correct? The
Last two,
finale?
yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's wonderful. So for those people that are looking to watch the series, you can now say, I know what lenses and camera were used on
Yeah.
all of
Oh,
these
and
episodes.
I got to say, I've seen the trailer for Fargo, and they're using those lenses exclusively, and it looks incredible. That the work that Dana Gonzalez is doing is just amazing.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
interesting how they didn't concentrate on making it flare a lot, right?
Yeah.
He's using it more because the resulting effect of having the blue flare characteristics is a warmer overall feel to the lens. So it's a bit warmer than a Supreme Prime in the color temperature skin. I think the skin tones and the look of it is a little different, and I think Dana really and the team, camera team there, really exploited that. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. We have our first question from the audience. So can we unmute David Kruta? I hope I'm saying his last name right.
Hey, thanks for putting this on. I'll just read my question
Absolutely.
because I wrote it out. So the lighting in the trailer is really dark, in a good way. I mean that as a compliment.
Thank you.
But you're able to create really nice separation between the subject and background. And I noticed you gave like a really beautiful shape and highlights to the talent while keeping everything moody. I was wondering if you could speak to your lighting methods and specific units and what you like to do to achieve that look.
Sure. Well, the one major unit we use is big black material, negative fill. We always try to start with negative fill. So we always like to take away the front light. So in order to shape the face. I'm very much into soft light, as I was mentioning before. And in my opinion, the closer you can get a big diffusion frame to an actor's face, the more beautiful and the more natural the lighting is going to look. And a lot of times what we're doing is I'm sure you're familiar with the big book lights. So we'll take a 12 by bounce and we'll bounce. If we're inside in the studio, we might use tungsten lights. We might use 10Ks or 5Ks. If we're outside, we would be using HMI. We'd bounce it into the big 12 by, and then we would put a return diffusion frame. So the light's bouncing and then coming back through soft to the face. And seems crazy, but we try to, we're always, my key grip, John Westerlaken, who's just amazing, gaffer, Todd Lapp, always fighting to put more and more diffusion in. And I find the more layers you put in and the softer the light gets, the nicer it looks. Key grip, John Westerlaken invented this great tool. He calls them flagpoles or wag flags. And what they are is, it's sort of like a curtain rod, and it's got a hanging shear on it. And you can roll it up or down, and they roll out. They're about 8 by 8. So he can put them up, and you, instead of having a frame where you have 2 stands, you can put them on 1 stand, and they hang loose like a curtain. So when you're using big sources like that on set, and you end up closing off the set, and it's hard to get in and out. Well, with these, they're like curtains, so you can just push through them. They're hanging there, and then what we like to do is we can join a lot of them together and make a much bigger source, but they're super handy. It's just a great tool. I use them all the time now. More questions regarding?
Yes, we do. We have a question from Nikhil. So we'll let Nikhil ask the question live. He's joining us from New York. How you doing, Nikhil?
Hey, John, how's it going? Can you folks
Good,
hear
how are
me?
you?
Good.
Oh, yeah.
Hey. Thanks for doing this, John. I'm actually a writer filmmaker, so I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective. I'm interested in understanding sort of the conversations you had with the director and or the other department heads, production, design, costumes, whatever, in terms of arriving at the look for this near future alternate world kind of look that you have. I've checked out some of your clips. I haven't seen the show yet, but now that I've heard about it, I'm definitely going to check it out.
Great, thank you.
I wanna understand what those conversations were, and in terms of like, you know, how that exploration process was and what your finalization process entailed in terms of like documents or lookbooks, you know, what that kind of looked like.
Right. Well, our showrunner, Elliot Lawrence, he had a very strong vision for how the world should be. And the number one thing I would say is, and I've said it a few times already, he wanted it to look real. It had to look real. Because if it wasn't real, people wouldn't buy it and the visual effects wouldn't work. The idea was that because the witches had joined the military and taken over, technology hadn't advanced as quickly as it would have in our normal reality. And so we wanted to keep things very analog and very tungsten. So we stayed away from LED. We tried to use, I mean, if you look at the show, there's always tungsten lights inside. We were fighting. Sometimes it's hard to find tungsten lights, but we always fought to do that. I'm trying to think what else I can tell you about it.
That's really interesting that you were using tungsten lights in this day and age where everyone's all LED.
Yeah, and in the times when we needed to use LED, when we were using sky panels, we would always color them a little bit so they would have that tungsten sort of feel. We wanted the look to be antique without being sepia and too vintage. And to my taste, I veer more towards the yellow warm than the red warm. And that's where the show's being pushed. So we do it partially with color temperature on the camera, but I believe in keeping the skin tones pretty natural so that we have room to push them in whatever direction we want to go to in color timing. So I'll usually start with the base on set. My DIT David Skidmore is amazing. He can quickly color in the look for us, but we usually push it just a little further in color timing. But I think it's important to keep some wiggle room. And the Sony Venice, which I love, which I've been using a lot now, the color space on that camera is just great. It just seems like the perfect pairing, that camera combined with the lenses. I love those lenses. So I hope that answered the part of your question. So.
Okay, so the question, just to repeat it, because there was
Yeah.
some hard time, it was difficult to understand Mark, but his question is, in the credits, he noticed that aside from the Sony Venice, there's also Red Monstro credited.
Yeah. So yeah, to answer that question, we needed, we definitely wanted to shoot large format for that trailer. That was the whole idea, to showcase the lenses. We did a lot of drone work. There's an overhead, there's a lot of drone footage. And at that point, the Venice was pretty new, and the guys at the drone company at Revere, the guys are an amazing company based in Vancouver. They could fly the Venice, but at that point, it was very difficult for them to set the drone up so the camera could point straight down. So they had a Monstro set up, and they offered that up, and that would give us the shot looking straight down. There's one shot that it's very high up and it's very graphic. It's looking dead straight down. So in order to do that, we needed to use the Monstro. So the Monstro was used on the drone only. So that was the reason.
And in fact, you use the drone with the same setup with the Monstro also for passing, for the short that we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think Mark is talking about passing, actually.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but we did similarly on the Motherland pilot. We did the same thing. We would mix it with Monstro.
And what were your other tools that you liked using? Because I saw there was Techno Crane, there was a few other things. Did you use gimbals or Steadicams?
We didn't. It wasn't a very, very big Steadicam show. Towards the end, the last 2 episodes, we did some Steadicam. I own a Ronin, which we have on board all the time, which is a really great, handy tool. That's another thing that I wanted to mention about the lenses. They're such great lenses, and when you look at them, you look at the size of them. They're perfectly friendly for gimbals and for handheld, and it's quite amazing, and they're mostly pretty similar in size. So it's a really nice little package to work with.
Usually they're all about this size.
Beautiful. And we did a lot of Techno Crane. I'm trying to think of what else we really did. Our Key Grip has some interesting camera vehicles, like he's got a battery operated. It's sort of like an ATV, which we would mount the Ronin on. We did some stuff on a beach later on with that. Mostly, we have a really cool Techno Crane up in Vancouver. I believe it's the only one in the world. We have a 100-foot Techno Crane, and we use that quite a bit. And it's quite surprising in how easy it is to move around. It's on a motorized base, but that came in very handy. We did a scene where the girls are doing they're training to fly, and so they're jumping out of trees. So we needed it for that.
Next question is from Marshall Victory.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this. Let's see. My question is, what are the tools you use to judge skin tone, especially since there's so many tones of skin? Like, are there specific tools that you use, or are you judging by eye? Like, people always say skin tone, but I'm curious what that means to you.
Well, not really tools, but yes, judging by eye, and when you have different tones, you learn to recognize on the waveform monitor where certain skin tones, where they show up. So it's sort of like a digital light meter in a way. So you're seeing the different values on the waveform, but truthfully, the color space on the Venice, it just handles the color, the skin tones, the varying skin tones so well. It's not really something you think about too much. So that's the best way I can answer that question.
Very good. Nice. Yeah. Next question we have is from George's iPad. So let's activate George's iPad.
Beautiful. Do you see my question?
Yes.
I saw one of your stills. You had multiple cameras shooting.
Yes.
And how did you balance that off with, the vision was cinematic, epic, to me.
Singular.
A singular point of view, a la 1917. No. And I said it must have been the lenses, right, Snehal?
Well, working with prime lenses is definitely the first step if you're trying to do something like that. You're absolutely right. The idea is not to put a zoom lens on and zoom in and out and just go crazy. With the TV schedule and with some of the epic scenes we were shooting, you had no choice, but you had to. I mean, basically, we worked with A and B camera. We worked with it quite a lot, but we had a rule where we didn't feel like we had to run both cameras all the time. So if we needed to, we would, or if there was a good shot, we would. But we didn't feel the urge to always keep those cameras rolling. And I think the thing about using multiple cameras, it's really important where you put the cameras. So if you can keep your cameras sort of close to each other and in the shadow side of the subject, you can keep that cinematic vision. I think it's when you start, cross-covering conversations. And if Mikhail Solomon's there, he's asked me to do that a few times. Sometimes you need to cross-cover conversations, but it's better to stay within a similar camera placement with your different sizes in order to keep that vision.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, George, for asking that. It's a really poignant
Thank
question.
you.
It makes a lot of sense. We're moving on to Drew Dawson. Drew's got a question. Nice to see you, Drew. Let's we'll get you unmuted. Hey, how you doing?
Drew.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have ear pods and a kid screaming in my apartment hallway right now.
We can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, you were talking about a bit about waveform monitors and using that to judge skin tone and exposure. Do you still feel like in like this sort of digital age and, to craft your image that you're still trying to find and establish like a good light ratio with your meter? And like, do you try and find that in prep? Is it more, it's a bit of a personal thing for everyone, I think, how they approach the project, but is that more kind of a feeling after, a long period of experience, or do you feel like, abiding by ratios is still kind of relevant?
Oh, it's definitely relevant. When I used to shoot film, I would clutch my spot meter and it was like my little safety tool in my hand all the time. And we'd use it all the time. When we made the switch to digital, I thought I would use my meters, but frankly, you just don't. It's not something that I've ended up doing. The beautiful thing about shooting digital as opposed to shooting film and using meters and not using meters, I found that when I used to shoot film, it was more of a mathematical process. I would have my spot meter and I'd know if I was shooting at 2.8, I would have my key and I would want to underexpose a stop to get that richness. So the key would be at a 2. And then I knew, depending on the film stock I was shooting on, if I could get the fill level down to a 0.7 or a 0.75, I would have just a little bit of detail in the face. So it was a numbers kind of thing. And I think the whole digital thing is just incredibly liberating because it becomes more creative and less mathematical, if that makes any sense to you. So you end up looking at the screen and, 9 times out of 10, I have a DIT sitting next to me and he'll chime in and he'll say, I think you're pushing it a bit too far there, or maybe, maybe you want to bring that light down a little bit. But mostly I just light by eye now, and I flip back to log and I check to see if something's blowing out or if it's too far gone. But I love shooting digital. I love shooting it just because you have that creative freedom, and you can be much more bold too. With film, with that 0.75 in the shadows, you never really knew till you got your dailies the next day. With digital, you can see it right in front of you. So I would say set up, do some tests, look at the waveform, see where your highlights end up on a face, and basically use your eye. Just trust your eye. Trust your eye, but check your log, is what I would say. Does that answer your question?
Drew says, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to hear insight because everyone kind of finds their path on that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm sure some people use their meters and they love it, and that's the way they work. And however you do it, there's so many different ways to approach it. But for me, that just seems to work.
Of course.
Yeah.
Great. So for
Thanks,
those
Drew.
people that joined us a little bit later, just look at the bottom and you'll see a little chat button. And if you click that, then you can go ahead and put your questions that you have in the chat window, and we'll choose them from there to ask Jon. So Jon, I wanted to ask you about, hitting your marks, because looking even at the screen that's behind you right now in this sequence here, I think this is episode 3, 2 or 3, I forgot which
this
one.
is 4. 4.
Okay. So in this, you really get into this action stuff, right?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile, having to shoot action where you're using a full frame camera system with usually longer focal length lenses, like you mentioned, so your depth of field is quite shallow.
Yeah.
And this is a show where there's a lot of movement and action going on. How do you follow it and not drive your ACs like bat crazy, because you're trying to really keep up with everything that's going on. Even in a sequence like this, your depth of field, you're probably you're wide open, if not wide open, at least a T2 maybe with the shot. So could you tell us that?
Well, I think in terms of focus, things have definitely changed since film days, where people used tape measures and they stood and they judged distances. It seems like pretty much all the assistants we work with these days, they work off of a monitor. And frankly, I don't know. I used to be a focus puller, and I have no clue how they manage to keep things in focus. But I end up hiring people who are great at what they do, have a great attitude about it, and are willing to try and work wide open and don't complain about it. I don't think I work with the focus puller I work with is a guy named Ed Morris. And Ed is he's just unbelievable. He nails things. It's uncanny the way he nails things, and he never complains, and he's just always got a good attitude about it, and I guess he trusts himself. But I mean, the power of the crew, of having a good crew, like having a great gaffer, a great grip, having great operators. We had a great operator who did the pilot in the first episode, Sylvain Dufault. She came from Montreal, just brought a real beautiful framing to the show, and she created an operating look, I think, that she passed on to Joss Oman, who kept it going on A camera on the show. Just having great people who are into what they do, who care about the project and want to do great shots. I mean, don't want people who are just punching a time card, want people who are committed to the project. And usually, I'm very lucky because there's a lot of great people that I work with who are into it. And I have a B camera operator, Jan Wolf, who's actually a cinematographer in his own right. He's fantastic. And when I watch the episodes and I see the second unit that he does, he could just shoot the shots and pump them off, but he puts little touches and he tries to maintain what I'm doing. People really care. I think that's important with the crew, is to inspire a crew, get them to be part of this whole thing that they're creating, so they feel that they're doing their best work. But a great focus puller is hard to find. So when you find them, you lock them down.
And people don't a lot of times understand like how it's an art form. There's
Absolutely.
no autofocus that can replace a person making a creative choice when pulling focus. It's an art form in itself. Yeah,
absolutely. And it seems like you only get noticed when you make mistakes, when you're pulling focus. When things are just in focus, people tend not to notice you. I always notice, but
by the way, Sylvain is on the call, is here. So so maybe we can activate Sylvain if she's got a question or wants to chime in and say something about the show. It'd be wonderful to hear. Sylvain, you are unmuted in case you want to say something.
With my French accent?
Yes, please.
Hi, Jon. Well,
how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I don't have really a question, but I think Jon is right. Jon and Steven really make us feel part of the process and being involved and having room to engage and even propose things makes that you really feel that you're part of the project. And talking about the lenses, it's true that just if we go back to the way they built, they're really nice. They're really made. They have a, as you say, Jon, it's not softness, but a
gentleness.
Yeah. But at the same time, they're really well made for the tools that AC use now. Those are the fact that everything is remote. And in the same time, they're light, they're small for handheld, they're fantastic. And to go from the gimbal to the handheld, the fact that the size of it is more or less the same. It's always the same balance. So it's a nice practical tools, and at the same time it's a beautiful tools of what it gives you to the image. But question-wise, I don't have question. I'm enjoying listening to you guys.
Well, thanks for joining us, Sylvain. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvain.
Cheers.
So our next question, we have a clarification requested from Rafael Puentes. So let's go ahead and activate Rafael really quickly so he can ask his question. And it was pertaining to something John said earlier. So Rafael, please go right ahead.
Hi, John.
Hi, Rafael.
Yes. My question is, could you explain me a little bit more about the phrase that you used? Trust your eyes, but check your luck.
Oh, check luck, for sure. And before I do that, I just want to mention Sylvain, incredible operator, but she's actually DPing right now. She's moved on to DPing, which is a sad loss for me and DPs all around, but she's killing it right now as a DP. Just wanted to mention
Congratulations. Very nice.
Yeah, so when I talk about log, I talk about the raw image that's unaffected by a LUT, what's coming straight out of the camera. And so typically the DIT has a switch that they can flip, and they can take all their color corrections off of it. So if you were talking about film, it would be the raw negative, basically. So I would trust my eye when I'm shooting, but every now and then I would just take off all my corrections, go to the raw image and look at it, the raw image or the log image. And I would look at it and I would make sure that I can see a little something in the shadows, and I can see something in the highlights, that they're not too blown out. Or perhaps I want the highlights to blow out, but you can actually just see it over there. But I think, honestly, be creative. Look at the monitor, light the shot the way you think you want it to be, and then just do a quick check and make sure that you're protected, you know? That's simply that.
Thank you, Rafael, for asking for that clarification. I'm sure you weren't the only one that was wanting to hear the answer, so that's great.
Thanks,
it's
Rafael.
really nice. You know, we have this opportunity to ask John these questions, so come with your hard stuff. Now, we have a good one right now from Josh Aussie. I think I pronounced it right, A-U-S-E-Y, Aussie. Aussie. Oh, okay. How you doing, Josh?
Hey, Josh.
Great. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thanks. We're hanging in there. So I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about your prep for the project. So, for example, how much time you had when you were brought onto the project to prep and the process of creating a lookbook or shot list with the director. And then if you could talk about, a little bit about your G&E package, I mean, obviously, kind of based on your budget or things. So would love to know about that, and, a lot of unpack there, but
For sure. Well, I think it's hard to remember because it was way back then, but I'm pretty sure we had 4 weeks prep. But what happens with prep is you spend a lot of time driving around in a van, looking at locations, choosing locations, then finding out that you can't afford that location or you've lost that location, so you get back in the van. So there's a lot of time spent in the van, but it's actually really good time because you're in the van with the producer, the showrunner, and the director. So you're driving around and you just get to talk, and as things come up. So it's interesting for me because even if the conversations don't involve cinematography, I'm sitting in the van and I'm really understanding what the project is, because they might be talking on the phone, like on a group call, to the costume designer about what they want. The production designer's with us all the time. So those are great moments too. Initially, when I met with the director, after I read the script, I threw together some images. I showed them to the director. He showed me things that he had. Then we talked some more. Then we end up looking at movies. We usually, you might find a photographer. Like, here's an example. There's this Japanese photographer named Yumi Sayan. I'm probably saying his name not perfectly, but he does firefly photographs. He goes out in the woods and he does these time exposures where he gets fireflies. And I love those photographs, and I saw them and I showed them to the showrunner and to the director, And we use them. I don't know if you've seen the first episode, but there's a scene where the two girls, they take a drug which they use for combat drops, and it makes them float in the air, and it's all slow motion, and they're falling in love, and it's a really lyrical, beautiful moment. So we used the fireflies all around that, and then subsequently they meet, I think, in episode 2, and they had this another love scene, and the fireflies show up. So it's little things like that, creatively, that show up. I guess you're always bouncing ideas off of each other. The director will throw out one idea, and then you'll say, well, what if we do this? Everything just evolves, I think, all the time. And you talk and you talk and you get an idea. Like, it was very clear from the beginning that this wasn't going to be, there's a little bit of handheld in the show for the combat, but it wasn't a handheld show. I wanted to be a classic, elegant kind of show, So we based our choices around that. If we didn't have to move the camera, we didn't move the camera. We like doing nice static wide shots. Then at the same time, we move the camera when that storytelling tool is needed. So, but it's a classic, elegant kind of look is the way I would describe it. I'm trying to think what else you're asking. You're asking about building a package, how that works. I had just previously, I'd shot for the first time with the Venice. I knew I wanted to use the Venice. It's a weird situation because they actually delivered the show in HD. It's not even delivered in 4K. So I had to pitch the network that I wanted to shoot 6K because I wanted the large format look combined with the ZEISS primes. But I mean, it's a huge budget cost to do that. And the guys at Freeform, Joe D'Oliveira, he's one of the producers, the post supervisor coordinator. He was behind me on that. Gary at Freeform, who runs post, he was behind us on it. They'd seen the little movie that I'd done passing, and they loved the way that looked. Everyone pushed for it. So it just seemed like a natural idea to use that camera, to use those lenses. It was a little bit of, we shot we masked 2.1. So it's kind of pushing more towards anamorphic. It's not quite 16:9. I was told that the network, there's no way, they've never done that. They'll never let you do that. And so I said, well, let's ask anyway. And we asked, and surprisingly, they came back. And I think they wanted the show. They loved the feel of Handmaid's Tale and Man in High Castle. And I stealthily, when I did my pitch to the network, I used pictures from Handmaid's Tale. So I think that helped sell it. So it just, those little things make a big difference. So yeah. And then in terms of the lighting package and the grip and electric, we usually, as we see where we're going to be, how many big lights we're going to need, what kind of big lights we're going to need on a daily basis, we try to build them into the package because it's more cost effective to do that. I use a lot of negative fill, so there's always, I'm always fighting to get condors so we can put big frames on there. We have Key Grip John Westerlake, and just the rigs that they do, how quickly they do them and how they put them on the condors. So they put up big black tents and they have floppy corners that drop off. Just always fighting for those kind of tools, and lighting cranes at night, so. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate that. And our next one is from Sarah Kinney. So if we can activate Sarah, let's hear what Sarah has to say. She's got a great question, actually.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes,
hey, Sarah.
Yeah,
how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. This show has such a unique look. Can you talk about your approach to handling some of the effects, like what was done practically and what was done in post, and I guess just your relationship with or collaboration with the VFX super on set and in post?
Yeah. The visual effects were done by this company out of Montreal, a company called Folks, and they were amazing. I always push whenever I can to do something that's interactive, whether it's lighting or if there's some debris in the air that relates to the visual effect that we're doing. As I always push to do that, and the visual effects supervisors, they usually filter that. They say, well, here's an example. We did, have you seen the first episode? Yeah. So in the scene in the coral chamber, when it gets kind of out of control at the end and there's this force, They wanted the image to shake like crazy. We experimented with all kinds of shaking devices. We were shaking the camera. And we even tried like personal massagers on the lenses. We were holding it on the lens, and it actually looked really good, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to have that control because they were doing other things or making an anvil glow really hot. So usually whenever, it's just good always to pitch and throw out ideas and things that you can do to tie things together. What we did an interactive light on top when it started to get going. And to my taste, when you do that, it's always good not to be too heavy-handed with it, but to be nice and subtle. So we did this thing when the lights started going crazy, and then instead of getting too wild, we had it was like a moving light. It was a Mac or something, and it was pounded into our grip and gaffer. They sent one of their guys to a material store, and they found this cool silvery iridescent material. So we had that up on bounces, and once that got going, we had it kind of gently moving in there. And I typically, it's like when I work in Photoshop, usually like I'll put an effect on and then I set it the way I like it, and then I just back it off slightly. So I tend to do that with interactive light. You always just bring it back a little bit. Trying to think what else I can tell you about the guys. Well, the whole idea was that, and the thing that I kept talking to them about and they kept talking about, visual effects need to be based on camera lenses. They need to know exactly what a camera lens would do. An example, I did a show years ago called Masters of Horror, and we did this episode with John Landis, and he wanted the camera, it was like a wonder kind of shot. The camera started outside a door, went in through the door, and he wanted to go through the peephole, and then we did this wonder shot that walked through the house. So we shot it without the door, and then they created a door and they made the peephole. Well, when I saw the effect, we got inside, we were looking at the door, we got up to the door, we got inside the peephole, and everything was in focus in the house, and the peephole itself was perfectly sharp. And anyone who knows lenses knows that it would be out of focus. So it's those little visual clues that make a huge difference. And I think the system that you guys have on the lenses, the extended data, is that what it's called, Snehal?
Yes, correct. That's right.
Yeah. So you can explain that, but it tracks in real time where the focus and iris is. And I guess can you explain that better? Probably better than I can, Snehal.
Absolutely. So what it is these lenses are smart lenses, and they have a communication possible either in camera or externally. With the Sony Venice camera and Red Monstro or Red DSMC2 bodies, you actually get all the communication directly in it, including the extra stuff. Every other camera system like Aries, older Sonys or Canon, Panasonic, they can read Cook/I data, so they can track your focus and iris positions are tracked in real time in those camera systems. But with the new technology that we have, we also give you what John is talking about, your shading and distortion, your bend of your lines, your distortion, and also how different is the exposure from the center of the frame to the edge, because as you open up the lens, that change becomes even more drastic. So for this peephole shot that John is talking about, to be able to emulate the peephole correctly, you want to know how much distortion I'm going to have in that wide angle lens and how much darker is the edge of the frame going to be than the center. And you need to know it in real time, because as you focus in iris, those values change. So this lens, along with our CP3 XD and our Radiance lenses, will actually track that information. With a Sony Venice and a DSMC2 body, it'll give all that extra data automatically to the camera. It's baked into the video files. You can extract it later and use free plugins and Nuke and After Effects to make use of this info. Any other system, you can record externally in a small box that will also save this info. But this is helpful nowadays because it's giving the tools to the visual effects supervisors they didn't previously have. They never had any real-time tools to tell them what lenses are doing. They always had to do a best guess when it came to shading and distortion by shooting charts. And then they would shoot charts at different focal distances and try to figure out, as you change focus, what's actually going on. But that's just a best guess, and this is giving you real info. So that's the big difference, especially when you're talking now full frame, where you're seeing more of the glass. You're going to see more of the distortions on some of these focal lengths than you ever did before in a smaller sensor, quite honestly. So it becomes even more important to get accurate data. And that's what the XT technology does. It's also available in the Fuji Premista zoom line of lenses as well. So we're not the only ones. We're licensing the technology we've built on the Cook/I protocol platform and just added some more information.
But that's great for the visual effects guys, and it also saves a little bit of time on set. So, but I think, you know, the point that I made earlier is you really want to think about what a lens would see, you know, and it's similar where the lighting would be. It's just visual effects are good taste too, I find, and I think these guys and at folks, they just have good taste and subtlety, you know. So yeah.
Cool. So we have a question now from Ricardo Matamoros. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And he's actually a member of the Venezuelan Society of Cinematographers. So we're honored to have you here asking questions. So please, Ricardo, we're going to activate your mic. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. And thank you, John, for sharing all these experiences with all of us. My question is related to, you know, more than what type of special precautions or considerations are you taking on set when you know that you have HDR trim passes and deliverables on the way? Thank you.
Well, you know, that's definitely new territory for me. On this on Motherland, we did not do HDR deliverables, so it wasn't an issue on this show. I did finish shooting another show for Netflix that's going to come out in September, and we are grading right now in HDR. And I felt like maybe because I'm new and I'm not sure, I didn't really do much different than I normally do. I just shot the way that I would. We weren't monitoring on set with HDR, so it was hard for me to know. But when we took it into the suite and for the work that we've been doing, it seems to all work out and not really be an issue. I did shoot a small clip for Sony. It was something called Daydream, a little short film. And we shot 6K HDR, and that was for the purpose of showing on their big CLED screen, their big 32 by 16 foot screen. And when I shot that, I was lucky enough to have the X300, which is an HDR monitor on set. But typically, I don't think people monitor on set in HDR. It's more of a studio kind of monitor. And it's fairly expensive and fairly large to lug around. So, but as I said, I'm just dipping my feet into the HDR pool right now. I'm not that experienced with it yet. So maybe let's talk again in a year and I'll have some information for you.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Snehal.
Thank you, Ricardo. So nice to see you on here. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had a great time listening in and listening to the conversation with Jon Joffin. John, you are wonderful. First of all, it was such a pleasure working with you during the launch of the Supreme Primes, because you and Aisha Schliessler, Tobias Schliessler's daughter, really came up with a wonderful story and scenes to showcase the lenses, but also to experiment with. And since we started our relationship, I couldn't be happier to know you, because it's fun to see all your successes one after the other and all the new things that you're doing. So please leave us with 2 pieces of information. First, just recap again what your next project is, because I believe you just said that you have a movie for Netflix. Yeah. And then also, what is your favorite thing that you're watching right now that you're home because of the pandemic? What is it that you're watching? Because we want to know that too. Yeah.
Right. So things that I've been watching, I've been watching a cool show on Amazon Prime called 000. And it's sort of a drug cartel story. It takes place in Italy and Morocco and around the world. And it's shot by an Italian DP, and I can't remember his name right now, but he shot The Great Beauty, I believe. And it's just really good. It's a great story, but it's also shot in a beautiful, kind of natural sort of way. It's a lot of dusk shooting and available light too, but it's beautiful. I recommend that. A guilty pleasure, I've been watching a Spanish show called Money Heist, which is on Netflix, and I think it's in the Spanish. The real translation is House of Paper, and Casa del Papel. My bad Spanish, sorry, apologies everyone. I'm trying to think what else I've been watching. Really, I love Better Call Saul, because Breaking Bad is just such a great show. Also, I've been watching a great show called Plot Against America, which is it's also shot on the Sony Venice. A friend of mine, Martin Algren, shoots that, and it's a really interesting show because the production design's beautiful, and he's shooting that camera in the dual ISO mode. He's shooting the whole show based at 2500 ASA, so it has a really interesting film look for all cinematographers out there, and it's a great show. Yeah, Handmaid's Tale too, great looking show. Highly recommend that one. So that's good. And what was the second question?
What your next project? Just recap what the next thing you're doing.
Oh, okay. It's I think it's gonna with the virus right now. I'm not sure if it's gonna be delayed, but it's supposed to air in September. It's a 9-episode series. It's called Julie and the Phantoms, and it's Netflix's first musical that they've produced actually. And Kenny Ortega is the director. Super interesting man. He did all the High School Musicals and choreographed some amazing movies. Super fun to shoot, and we shot that actually we shot Venice and Supreme Primes on that show too. A lot of fun. Musical, going to work every day and doing big numbers. I really like that. Oh, one other show that I wanted to mention. It's a show called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, and it's kind of a light show. It's a musical too, but the DP on that show, Shasta Spawn, she's doing, it's a light show, but just with all the musical numbers and all the movement they're doing, she's got the characters looking absolutely beautiful, and I'm really amazed at her lighting. I don't know that I could even do that, but that's a fun, inspiring kind of show to watch too. So yeah, there you go.
Cool. Thanks for the recommendations, John. Thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure. Tony, you have any final thoughts for us?
Well, thanks to everybody for coming in today. We are hoping to do more of these. Thanks to John. I've watched you across a couple of meetings now. Happy to have you with us on our channel as well. Again, thanks for everybody for being here. We are going to take this. You can see it's being recorded. We'll edit it a little bit just for some clarity and to make it look a little nicer. And then we'll make sure to either send it out or post it on our YouTube page. So we'll let you know when it's available for you to review at your leisure. Thanks, everybody. We're glad you're here, and have a great rest of the day and a happy Easter.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Take care.
Be safe.